Many people are familiar with David Koresh, but does anyone know who Vernon Howell is? They are the same people. Vernon Howell changed his name to David Koresh in 1990 after reigning 3 years as the new leader of the branch of Davidians. David Koresh was a very significant pawn in the growth of the branch of Davidians, but was not where it started at all. Today I will inform you of the history of how the branch of Davidians started, how David Koresh impacted the cult, and where the branch of Davidians cult is at this time period. Let's start with the history of the Davidians. The branch of Davidians started off as a Seventh-day Adventist church until in 1942, Victor Houdoff, I still don't know how to say his name, felt God had called him to do greater things. In 1930, he wrote a book explaining how the errors of the denomination of the Seventh-day Adventists. And then he also, in 1942, that's when he separated from the church. In 1935, he founded Mount Carmel in Waco, Texas, with 11 followers. He renamed the cult the Davidian Seventh-day Adventists, and in 1955, Victor had passed away and left the cult to his wife named Florence, which led the group with false prophecies. The cult began to downsize to a few dozen when she left in 1962, and Benjamin Roden then became the leader of the new cult, and he changed the cult's name to the General Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. He passed away in 1978, which, when he left his heirs to his wife as well. Now that I've talked a little bit about the history of where the cult all started, I will now begin discussing how Vernon Howell affected the General Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. Vernon Howell was a big influence on the cult. He joined the group in 1981 just as a member, and in 3 years married a woman by the name of Rachel Jones, which was only 14 at the time, and he was 25. Power was in the midst between the newlyweds and the leader's son, George. Vernon was very charismatic, which put George in a bind and little behind for the race of the world to the cult. George went even as far as digging up a 25-year-old corpse and challenging Vernon to whomever brings the corpse back to life will be able to take the control over the cult. Vernon took pictures and then turned George into the police. George was charged and imprisoned in 1987. In 1985, a major international recruitment drive was established to bring in more followers for the cult. And in 1993, a total of 130 members lived in Waco at the compound. Vernon and his followers took over the compound and discovered some gruesome things, such as methamphetamine's laboratory and pornography. Both were removed, and then they moved in. In 1990, Vernon Howell changed his name to David, which signified King David of Israel, and Koresh after the Babylonian king Cyrus. And also in 1992, he renamed Mount Carmel to Ranch Apocalypse. David is said to have had 20 wives at the most, with 12 children from all of them. In 1993, the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, attempted to serve David Koresh a search warrant on the firearms violation. The suspicious neighbors seen the heavy artillery and ammo that was being brought into the compound, so therefore it raised doubts, which led to probable cause. This led to 6 dead Davidians and 4 ATF agents, while many others were wounded. When ATF agents withdrew, the FBI agents began a 51-day siege. On the 19th of April in 1993, the FBI agents attacked the compound with tear gas and groups of FBI agents with heavy artillery, which led to a large disastrous fire within the compound. David Koresh and about 75 other followers were injured and stab wounds, gunshots, and smoke inhalation, including 21 children. Dr. Bruce Perry, chief of psychiatry at Texas Children's Hospital, stated the children that were released in negotiations were girls as young as 11 and were given stars of David, which signified they were ready to have sex with the cult leader. Now that I've talked about Vernon Howell, or shall I say David Koresh, how he affected the how he affected the cult lethargically, I will now cover where the branch of Davidians are today. The survivors, for the most part, have carried with their loves after being imprisoned for weaponry charges. Clive Doyle, a 72-year-old Australian Texan, still lives in Waco with another survivor, Sylvia Martin. Clive Doyle is an unofficial spokesperson and historian for Mount Carmel. He says that they're still waiting on Koresh and his other followers to resurrect. He says, we survivors of 1993 are looking for David and all those who died, whether in the shootout or in the fire. Doyle says, we believe that God will resurrect a special group of people. 12 people still live around the community where Mount Carmel fell in scattered mobile homes. The new cult is called Branch, the Lord of our Righteousness, and they also have new beliefs. The new leader, Charles Pace, was a member in 1980 and left when David Koresh twisted the ideals and teaching of the Bible. Charles moved back to the compound in 1994 and has been living on the grounds ever since. The survivors are still going strong, and they still have belief David Koresh will come back from the dead. The conclusion: the branch of Davidians is not the only cult that has been under the influence of leaders that has destroyed the name and beliefs of the certain religious group. Many people describe these groups as cults, which classifies them in a category as demonic or outraged people who have no realistic beliefs. This information told you how the branch of Davidians started, how David Koresh impacted the cult, and where the branch of Davidians is as of today's time. Even though David Koresh was an average Joe, he eventually manipulated so many people he finally got what he wanted, which was power over a religious group. You never know who you might meet. That's it.